Chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, joined by our Vice Chairman, Joe Crowley, who is, if he's smiling behind me, it's not because things are going so well here in Congress, it's because his Mets are up 3-0. And
no, it's because we beat L.A.
Yeah, and I know it's because he beat L.A. So
Sorry, thank you.
They did. They kicked butt, and no other way to put it. And for those of us who were interested in seeing the Cubs do something for the first time in a long time, it may be a long time before we get to say that again as well. But congratulations to the Mets so far. It ain't over, though. It ain't over, Joe. It's not over. It is for L.A. It's 2-1 on this one. Adam's from L.A. too. But getting down to some serious business, we just had a great caucus meeting where we discussed so many things that are going to be on the floor this week. It's interesting. We're going to have a busy week. A lot of major pieces of legislation up this week, not because all of a sudden we're doing our work. It's because we're hitting all these deadlines. And I think that's the distressing thing. As America watches Congress grind to a halt, and we watch as the Republican dysfunction in their own conference and their civil war has made it impossible for them to govern, in fact, to even have a leader, we're about to smack up against some major deadlines. And it's curious. At a time when the world is looking for leadership, because there are so many different hot spots around the globe, here in the Congress, Republicans who the public would really like to see govern are caught in this internal civil war. And with 5 days left before House Republican inaction causes a whole bunch of construction projects to go silent throughout the country because they won't have the authorization in these various states and cities and counties to use the monies they would typically have to build roads, repair those bridges. We're not going to talk about that this week in Congress. With 5 legislative days to go before those roads and bridges watch their construction shut down. We're only 8 days away from watching America for the first time default on payment of its past bills. And that's because Republicans haven't gotten their act together to give us a chance to vote to keep America paying its bills, including to our veterans, to all those people who worked very hard and now are on Social Security. And we're only 22 days from, again, another government shutdown, 22 legislative days. So 5 legislative days from putting a halt on all or so much of the road construction that's going on throughout the country. 8 legislative days away from watching America default on its payment of its debts, which could cause us to lose our credit rating, which would cause interest rates to go up for American Treasury certificates, which would, of course, cause interest rates to go up for every American who owns a home and has a mortgage or has an auto loan or a student loan. And 22 legislative days before Republicans do what they did 2 years ago, and that is to shut down our government. And so, time to get to work. And we'd ask our Republican colleagues to select their leader so we can know how they wish to govern, and then let's come together and get these things done and avoid these shutdowns. And unfortunately, this week, what we're going to do is watch a partisan committee do another hearing on Benghazi, not really on Benghazi, more about Secretary Clinton. And we're going to watch as Republicans, for the 61st time, put a bill up on the floor of the House to repeal or dismantle the Affordable Care Act. That's what we're doing this week as the clock is ticking on so many important things. America wants us to get our work done. We're extending a hand to our Republican colleagues saying, we're ready. Just tell us who your leadership is, and we'll do it with you. With that, let me turn to my colleague first, who is the ranking member on intelligence and a member of the Benghazi committee, investigative committee, who will have to run quickly, but he was gracious enough to join us. Let me turn now to Adam Schiff, my colleague from California.
Thank you, Chairman Becerra. I just wanted to set the context for tomorrow's hearing with Secretary Clinton. As you might recall, the Select Committee was formed about 1.5 years ago. It was formed over the best wishes of Speaker Boehner, who had resisted until that time calls to form this Select Committee. One of the few people in the room when the decision was made to form the Select Committee was Kevin McCarthy. And as Kevin McCarthy pointed out, and again, he was in a unique position to know, the primary object, the purpose of this select committee was to in some way damage Secretary Clinton. That motivation was then confirmed by another Republican member, Richard Hanna from New York, who acknowledged, although it may be politically incorrect for him to say, that the object of the committee was to go after a single person, that being Hillary Clinton. We then had one of the GOP's own hand-picked investigators on the Select Committee staff itself resign or express his intention to file a complaint against the committee for turning a broad investigation into a narrow one focused on Secretary Clinton. The chairman has said as recently as the last few days that we should ignore the comments of his own leadership, his own colleagues, and his own investigator, and judge the committee by the committee's actions instead. But when you look at the committee's actions, that is the most damning aspect of all. Early this year, the chairman announced a series of hearings we would have, about a dozen hearings, including the Secretary of Defense at the time of Benghazi, the head of the CIA at the time of Benghazi, the head of the Joint Chiefs, that would look into these allegations of gun running, of stand-down orders, and the like. All of those hearings were canceled. There is only one hearing scheduled since January, and that is with someone named Clinton. When you look at the press releases put out by this committee, about 25 since March of this year, 20 of them about Secretary Clinton or the State Department, 5 about anything else. When you look at the witnesses being interviewed, when you look at the interviews being attended by the chairman, the inevitable conclusion is there has really only been one object of this committee, and that is a very partisan attack on a likely Democratic nominee for president. This is a terrible and tragic misuse of congressional resources. I think in the future the Benghazi Select Committee will become synonymous with the abuse of congressional resources for a partisan purpose. It's time to put an end to this. The GOP has not announced what's going to happen after tomorrow. And indeed, I think that's largely because the GOP doesn't know what it intends to do after tomorrow. And so I think Democrats will have to analyze what the committee's intentions are going forward. But this has been a terrible precedent set. It may very well lead in the future to other majorities trying to decide whether they should form a select Benghazi committee, and that would also only magnify this abusive process. So that's essentially where we are going into the hearing tomorrow. Democrats will endeavor to do two things, I think: to see if there is some new and useful testimony that can be elicited regarding the events of Benghazi, which may be difficult after 8 investigations and already 2 appearances before Congress by Secretary Clinton on this very subject. We'll also try to endeavor to make it fair, to make sure the Secretary has a chance to answer the questions, that documents aren't used in a misleading way, that witness interviews aren't mischaracterized, so we will endeavor to make it fair. More than that, I'm not sure we or anyone else can do. But it will ultimately be up to the GOP to shut down a committee that has long outlasted any usefulness and has now been exposed as transparently political in nature and partisan in character. And with that, I'll yield to the Vice Chairman of our caucus, Joe Crowley.
Thank you, Adam. Let me first thank you for your service in this committee. The fact that I believe that this committee is a circus, a joke, and a debacle, it doesn't diminish your efforts to try to bring some sanity to it and bring some even-keeled. Respect the fact they have an agenda, but right now they have no agenda, no vision for the American people, nothing to offer them. And I think that's also why they find themselves in the predicament they're in today.
Any other questions? Yeah.
The administration last week announced a target of 10 million people to sign up for the Affordable Care Act, and that's not that much higher than about the 9 million that are right now signed up. So I wonder if you all were disappointed at all that the target for signups is not higher.
Let's see, 10 million people will have insurance that didn't have it just a few years ago. And is there a reason for us to be disappointed by that? I think every American, especially those 10 million, are probably pretty happy that they now have access to a doctor and a hospital and get quality care. there is every reason to be happy. You're forgetting that the 10 million does not include the close to 8 million or so, 9 million or so who have received access to health care as a result of the Medicaid program as well. And if some of the other states under conservative Republican governors would allow their own constituents, their own residents in their states to be able to qualify for Medicaid, expanded Medicaid, you'd have a whole bunch more folks who would be getting quality health care. But unfortunately, these working class folks, because that's most of whom are being excluded by these Republican governors, are working class Americans who make somewhere between $15,000-$20,000 a year to maybe $40,000 or $50,000 a year. Many Republican governors have decided not to allow them to qualify for expanded health care coverage or access to coverage as a result of the Affordable Care Act. So I think there's every reason to be pleased. Remember what the markers were. It was Republicans who said this would never work. In fact, it would cost us insurance throughout America versus getting more Americans who are uninsured covered. And I think if you look at the balance, clearly when you're talking close to 20 million people who are now insured or have coverage, that's a win. And don't forget, we often forget, it's not just about getting people covered. Today in America, all those people who have insurance won't find that they'll be discriminated against because some pre-existing condition. So you have a baby, your baby is born with a health condition or ailment. Used to be insurance companies used to be able to tell you, well, we'll still cover you, but that newborn baby of yours who's got that health problem doesn't receive coverage. That is no longer allowed under the law. All those young folks, like my girls, I have got girls who are in their 20s, they still get to stay under my coverage as a result of the Affordable Care Act. Unlike what happened in previous years where insurance companies would tell me, well, your child is now over the age of 18, she's on her own. Not anymore. Now I can have my two daughters who are 20 and 22 covered until they reach 26 under my insurance policy. So there is nothing but good news. And we still have work to do. We still have to make sure we continue to corral the rising costs of health care and make sure that the millions of other Americans who still haven't gotten insured get their coverage as well.
I think it's important also to stress that only in Washington could the term a million fall flat, let alone 10 million. It's an enormous amount of people who will have coverage who right now don't have it. And instead of focusing on that number, it's really about focusing on what the benefits of the Affordable Care Act have been and will be for those 10 million people, as the chairman has already mentioned. So it's moving forward. It's the law of the land. It's working for millions and millions and millions and millions of Americans. And it's working for our country. It's making America a better country and a more affordable place with proper health care to live in.
Lauren, did you have a question?
You and both serve on Ways and Means with Paul Ryan, who now likely could be the next speaker. Do you think that you could share some of the Democrats could share some of the similar relationship they had with Boehner, where he came over and worked with Democrats to get Democratic votes to pass kind of that must-do legislation? I mean, Paul Ryan, John Boehner, not that different ideology, they're same temperament. Do you think you could enjoy that relationship?
My sense from what I've heard from Paul Ryan is that he wants to be able to have a working coalition, not just within the Republican ranks, but in the House of Representatives, and that's a good thing. Many of us have had an opportunity to work with Chairman Paul Ryan on the Ways and Means Committee or Chairman Paul Ryan on the Budget Committee. I think he's a serious player. I think he's smart enough to know what he needs to do, and sounds to me like he's trying to make sure that if he does make the move to be Speaker, he does it so that he can get some things done. We welcome that, and we would welcome Republican leadership coming to work with us to get some of these very important legislative items done before we hit the wall or go over the cliff. And so I think on our side, on the Democratic side, we just would like them to decide so we can sit down and get to that common ground we need, because I don't believe the American public is all that interested in the feuding that goes on within their conference, and I don't believe the American public has much more patience with this gridlocked Congress. And so the dysfunction of the Republican conference has to stop, and the sooner they can do that, the better. If Paul Ryan is the guy, we're ready to work with him to get some things done for the American people.
I had the I was actually elected with Paul Ryan the same year, back in 1998. We've had similar paths in terms of our family structure. He has 3 children. I have 3 children now. At least he has at least 3 children. I don't know. I've served on the committee with him, and we've had a very good relationship back and forth. We go at it every once in a while in terms of the committee work, but at the end, you know, we still maintain a great personal relationship. In real more answer to your question, though, that demonstrates, I think, his ability to banter back and forth with us and to have good discussion. Whether or not he will actually work with Democrats to move an agenda that works for the American people, I think has more to do with whatever deal he's made or will make with the Freedom Caucus, with the Tea Party, the more extreme conservatives as well.
Yes, sir.
When people talk about Speaker Ryan being able to work with the White House with you guys and keep the Freedom Caucus tight ends, where you remember him stepping in and forging the kinds of coalitions you've been talking about?
Paul Ryan worked in this institution before he got elected to serve in the institution. He knows it well. He has risen in the ranks within his party, within the House. He was the selected vice presidential candidate on the Republican ticket for 2012. He's proven himself in so many different ways. There is no doubt that he has the ability to get some things done. Otherwise, I don't think Republicans would be considering him right now. And so we wish him well in that regard. I know that he played a role in trying to see if we could get to a consensus on immigration reform. But I would say this, at the end of the day, you got to do this as a team. And so Republicans have to decide who their quarterback will be. We're ready to work with him. We've been ready, our quarterback and our team, we've been ready for quite some time to work together and figure out where we go from here as a unified team together, reconciling our differences, coming to common ground. We just want them to get to work and resolve their issues. And whether it's Paul Ryan or anyone else, we're ready to work with whomever it is. They just got to decide, because there's no way you get anything done if you try to reach some compromise, some common ground, and they commit to try to deliver enough votes to get it done, and we deliver enough votes to help get it done. And if they fall flat and can't deliver their votes, nothing gets done. And that's what we've seen for far too long, is gridlock, because the dysfunction in the Republican ranks has made it impossible for them to govern. But they got the majority, and they've got to govern.
I would only add that there is a level of dysfunction that exists within their caucus that I've never witnessed before in my history of almost 30 years in government, on the state level and now on the federal level here in Congress. And I don't think it's my job to, in any way, shape, or form, give an opinion necessarily on Mr. Ryan's performance, because that could either hurt or help with his own caucus. In fact, last week when he was leaving the House, I yelled out to him, "Hey, Paul, you stink, and you can use that if it helps you," in a kind of joking way. I think what Xavier, though, has said is that he is someone who, before being elected to the House of Representatives, had a full understanding of how this place ought to operate, I believe. He was a student of Jack Kemp, Buffalo, New York. And he has his own ideas, economics, and primarily the Reagan form of economics, the trickle-down theory of economics. It's not something that I agree with, but that's something that he has put forward. He had worked with Patsy Murray on putting together a budget deal, so I think there are elements there to show that. He's, in many respects, one of the youngest members of the Republican caucus, but appears to be an adult-like member of that caucus as well, and willing to lead their caucus if they give him the faith to do that.
You guys talked about the dysfunction and how it's a bad thing. Could you see yourselves voting for any Republican speaker if it would help end the dysfunction that you clearly...
I don't plan on voting for any Republican speaker.
We're in trouble if Republicans require or need Democrats to help them elect their next leader. It doesn't make for a good way to run government. With that, thanks all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.